Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien here on the morning of Wednesday, January 24th, 2024, with a special campaign announcement from the Ralph Crandon campaign. Well, Americans, as the campaign manager for Ralph Crandon on the independent presidential campaign for president, here is the reaction from last night's Republican primary in New Hampshire. So it looks like we got the nightmare that nobody wanted. And I mean Trump and Biden, two candidates that nobody actually wants. Okay? And we're heading into the national nightmare in November. I got some advice for you Americans, both Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and those of you who never vote. One of them would be vote for Ralph Crandon and tell the parties that you mean business. Their shenanigans will no longer be tolerated. Another one is speaking to the second in command that came in second in the Republican primary in New Hampshire, Nikki Haley. This is the favorite alien campaign manager of Ralph Crandon's campaign saying to Ms. Governor Haley, Governor, you cannot win the Republican Party. And the donors are going to drop you like a hot potato between now and your state in South Carolina, which you're going to lose like DeSantis was looking at Florida. He was going to lose terrible in his home state. Do you really want to lose terrible in your home state of South Carolina? I don't think so. Because the Republican Party is so entrenched in extremist rightist issues, and you are so extremist conservative. And there is a word for that. Extremist conservative is what you are. The way you conducted the campaign, you could have beaten Trump easily. But your conservative issues, and that didn't work anymore. You got to drop these Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan conservative issues on the Republican Party. They don't work anymore. You can have conservative issues. I got no problems with that. Views, I mean. But remember that they got to be centered views conservative. You can only go so far to the left and so far to the right as conservative. You got to stay into the center. And if you notice CNN's talking to different voters, and there was 25 that they talked to that I looked, because I watched it most of the day, and they were saying that I'm a Republican. If Nikki Haley would have been a little bit more to the center, I would have voted for her instead of Donald Trump. That's not an exactly vote that they did. They didn't vote their conscience. They voted because they didn't like Nikki Haley's conservative issues, and they don't like Donald Trump's issues. But he rules the Republican Party, so they went with the ruler. If I were Nikki Haley, I would drop my campaign in the Republican Party, tell the donors, okay, please support me at a lesser amount, and mount a Obama-style campaign with internet, free access to CNN and Fox because they allow you for free to put your views on their program, and use the video because everybody has phones and streaming and everybody gets videos. Okay? And you notice that some of these videos go viral, huh? And tell your supporters that you're on video and still appear as much as you can on CNN and Fox, because that's free airtime for the U.S. government. And Nikki Haley, here's the problem that the Republicans have with Donald J. Trump. If I were you, I would buy out of the race. Okay? And the only way to beat somebody who you don't like, let me give you an example. Let's go back to 1940, Governor Haley, 1940, Democratic Convention. There was no primaries at the time, okay? And in January 20th of 1941, the term of Franklin Delano Roosevelt was supposed to end. And remember, this is pre-22nd Amendment that limited the president to 2 terms. The only thing that was there was tradition. George Washington's tradition of not seeking a 3rd term in 1796, and it was reaffirmed by Thomas Jefferson not seeking a third term in 1808. That's where this came from, Governor Haley, okay? But then, in 1940, the country was as fragmented as it is today. You had very many conservative Democrats who didn't like Roosevelt, especially his New Deal. And you got outright crazy Republicans like you do today who were, how would you say, xenophobics, I would call them, as in Edgar Rice Burroughs and Charles Augustus Lindbergh, who liked what you call Make America First. Remember MAGA from President Trump? Governor Haley? Well, that's where he gets it from. That was a very ultra xenophobic and very much authoritative group back in 1940. And it had very much influence. I mean, Wendell Willkie was the Republican nominee eventually, and they supported him wholeheartedly. And the Democrats knew that Wendell Willkie was a formidable candidate, even though he was as disastrous as Donald J. Trump is to the Republicans today, because he will not win a national election. So what did the Democrats do? They knew that their candidates that they had, one of them was the Secretary of Defense, I think, or State under Roosevelt. The other was his Vice President, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Farley and Mr. Gardner, were confirmed candidates for the Democratic Convention. So here we are at Chicago Stadium in July 15th through the 18th, I believe, 1940. And put it this way, Franklin Roosevelt had refused to make clear that he was a candidate for the 1940 election, okay? He did flat out said, I am not a candidate for the presidency in 1940. His wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, was very much against a 3rd term. So everybody knew that he was out, and he was. But then again, something happened. In 1940. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and France and England declared war on that, and it became the phony war between September 1939, after they demolished Poland along with the Soviet Union. But from the end of September 1939 to around May of 1940, it was the phony war, where everybody sat with their guns pointed at each other and nothing happened. Then, in May of 1940, the Germans under Hitler declared blitzkrieg and ran through the Low Countries and conquered France. And by the time of they had most of Western France, Western Europe, under their control. By the time of July 1940, they were right there. And Roosevelt said, hey, there's nobody here. Wendell Willkie will do nothing. Gardner and Farley will do nothing here. So there was a stunt developed. He didn't attend the convention in Chicago, Illinois, in July of 1940. He stole the nomination from Gardner and Farley. One of those two was going to get it. Okay. But he had this guy, a guy in the Illinois. I forget. Well, his name was Barkley. Yeah, last name was Barkley. He gave him a note, a speech, actually. And Mr. Barkley, at the opening of the Democratic Convention, said, we got a note here from President Roosevelt. And he proceeded to read that note. If you read that speech, you'll understand what I mean. Took about 15, 20 minutes to read that speech. It was a long one. But when Mr. Barkley ended, another guy who was the superintendent of sanitation in the Chicago city yells out as a delegate from the Democratic Convention. Now, how did the superintendent of the sanitation for Chicago gets to be a delegate to the Democratic Convention? Ooh, boy, that sounds kind of sanitation, smells not too good, right? So this didn't smell good. And he yells out, we want Roosevelt! We want Roosevelt! Oh, boy. And the convention was starstruck there. It took them about 15 minutes to get the order back in control. But when the order was in control on the first ballot, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected candidate for the Democratic Party's nomination for U.S. President and went on to defeat Wendell Willkie in the elections in November of 1940. That's a stolen election if I ever seen one, President Trump. Now that one is a stolen election with all the shenanigans and stunts that were pulled in that convention to get Roosevelt in as Democratic candidate because he had not declared, he never did declare to be candidate, and yet he took the nomination, which he said he wouldn't. Now, if you say you're not going to be or take anything, you should be like President Johnson a few decades later. I will not seek and I will not accept your nomination as president of the Democratic Party for another term. And he stuck to his guns. Roosevelt didn't. Because he says he was the best guy for the job of World War II. Was he? Wow. World War II is a disaster. 90 million people died. Was he the best job for that? You could say, yeah, only 460,000 Americans died in that war compared to millions from other countries. But that was the end of MAGA, or I should say, Make America Great. Because after the election of 1940, they just folded. The xenophobics, nobody saw them again. Charles Augustus Lindbergh became a pain in the neck until he died in the 1970s. Edgar Rice Burroughs, well, he went back to Tarzan. And all the rest of those xenophobics created what 20 years later became the conservative ring of the Republican Party under Barry Goldwater. So you see, Miss Haley, as a campaign manager of Ralph Crandon, I tell you, if you want to really show those Republicans business, go as a third-party candidate, get out of the Republican nomination because that's sold for Donald J. Trump, and they have sowed the seeds of nightmare. This is your favorite alien. Good day.